Welcome to the Descenso Zone podcast, where we talk about creativity and personal growth through a lens of curiosity and humor. My guest today is an author, keynote speaker, life coach, and creator of the Hero Project, a framework helping people break destructive patterns, rebuild identity, and rediscover purpose. We talk about his path to becoming a coach, his three core frameworks, the hero's journey, the mentor's journey, and the surrender journey, and what those mean, plus the role of creativity and practical tools for change. Now, let's get into the zone with Adam Jablin. Adam, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, brother. It's my pleasure.
Your story touches on something a lot of people struggle with, I think, this gap between who the world sees and maybe who they feel like they are internally. And so I was hoping we could start by exploring this idea of identity and how it forms and how it can break down, and then how to also rebuild it, because I think this is something that you're quite an expert on. Maybe we could start with your story, though. You were a successful executive, stable, disciplined, sort of bodybuilder at one point, I think. So a lot of discipline and high performance, but you were privately struggling with substance. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. It was the grit, grind, push, charisma, suffering is beautiful. It was, everything was for the outside world. Everything was for the outside, from the body to the money, to the career, to even the labels, husband, father, boss, CEO. But internally, I was dying. I never did the internal work. So as good as the outside looked, the inside was in complete wreck.
How do you go from someone who's appears successful and then becomes self-destructive? Is there an emotional hole that you're filling with these substances, or is there something bigger at play? How did that come to be for you?
Yeah, well, it was a compounding effect. I was raised in New Jersey, and during my childhood, I was the fat kid. I was the heavy kid. My dad called me El Chubbo. It made me a people pleaser. It gave me a very extroverted class clown kind of personality, but it was a self-defense mechanism, because it was I want to make you laugh with me, not laugh at me. I don't want to be the brunt of the joke all the time. And so there were just emotions that I never processed in a healthy way, because I had already built a great protection mechanism, and I could read the room really, really quick. And I started developing my personality and my identity. Then we moved down to South Florida, where you can have your shirt off every day and be at the pool and be at the beach. And I hated it. I was the kid that wore a t-shirt in the pool and it would still stick to my fat. And one day I had it, maturity to growth, 11, 12 years old. And I just had it. I just made a decision. And I wanted to look like my idols, who was Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and these heroes in the movie, Jean-Claude Van Damme. And my mom was buying me Muscle and Fitness magazine and Flex magazine, because I'm a kid from the 80s and the 90s. So there were magazines back then, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and my first Weider weight set. And we stopped going to McDonald's every day, getting a 6-piece chicken McNugget, large fry, and large Coke. And she started grilling me chicken and having apples or oatmeal and egg whites. It was all very basic. No apps, no vegan, no keto, no macro calculators. But in 4 short years, I went from being the fattest kid in the class to the best built kid in the class. I went from people going Adam, how many Oreos did you eat last night? Poking at me, to, yo, man, how much can you bench press?
If you're enjoying this podcast, do me a huge favor and hit the subscribe button. Another way you can support me is to check out my kids' book. It's called Tiffy and Spiffy Meet a Kangaroo. It's a really sweet story about 2 preschooler best friends. One is a girl, one is a genie, and they go on magical adventures. It's on Amazon, and there is a link in the description. Please go check it out. And now, let's get back into the zone.
And the girls liked me. So I was right. It confirmed it. The outside matters. And being now that I built my body and I had the muscles, with the muscles came a certain amount of coordination. And I was able to play with the older kids. And there was something just cooler about older kids back then. You know, they had more freedom. They had more responsibilities. They knew the cooler people. They knew the best music. I was hanging with the older kids, and it gave me that confidence, and it just gave me that feeling of being the cool kid. And they were experimenting, and all I remember was one day after practice, everyone was drinking, and they passed it, and I drank it, and it fixed something inside of me I did not know was broken. All of those insecurities, all of the fat kid, all of the people pleasing, all of the worrying about the outside, that just went quiet. And Superman came out. And I wasn't cocky and arrogant and mean, not at all. I still had a really good heart, but I felt like I could walk on water. And I was so disassociated at the time. I remember even like looking at my body and being like, oh, I'm the guy, I'm the man. Like it was just so weird. And I chased that. I chased that mic with everything I knew. And I was the first kid in high school with a fake driver's license. King of the parties. I went to Arizona State University because back then in Playboy and Penthouse magazine, it was the number one party school, which it was. And I dominated there and I experimented, and it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that personality, that identity followed me all the way into my career, working for the family business, starting at the bottom, working my way to the top, first man there, last man to leave, but always the reward system of drinking and drugs and partying and having fun. So I never did the internal work.
So much to unpack there, Adam. I want to start with this question around the first time you had that drink and what that did to you, because clearly that was a pivotal moment for you in your upbringing. Do you think that drinking released inhibitions in you that allowed you to let go of the self-consciousness that you were feeling? Or was it something else that allowed you to sort of be more free? Because if you're already athletic and you've, got yourself in shape, it seems like you would feel that self-confidence naturally. Like, what was it about drinking that made you, I guess, have more freedom?
Inhibitions was a great word, fear, anxiety, and what I would actually call the ego. My ego is fun. Certain people have an inflated ego. So my ego is the kind that wants to keep me small. It wants to keep me worried. It wants to keep me over responsible for other people. My ego doesn't want me to go out there and extend myself and go on the hero's journey and go on an adventure. It wants to just constantly keep me safe. That's my ego. He's a very afraid little boy, very scared. And that's what got turned all the way down on the volume, just all the way down. And so, therefore, alcohol and drugs worked. I'm not an alcoholic and addict because I'm an idiot. It worked, and I wanted more of it. I just had no clue that it was a disease. I had zero clue that alcoholism and addiction was a disease.
I think a lot of young people experiment with those substances because of that feeling, because of that sense of not, I mean, in your case, it was that turning down of that worriedness. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. But I also think in some people, alcohol can turn up their outwardness as well. And so it makes them more free. It makes them less afraid to maybe be rejected or less afraid to be awkward. It's a social lubricant. I think that's why a big reason even adults use it, even just at social networking, on dates, in business meetings. It's a social lubricant. And so I can see how it can turn that volume dial down for you. But I guess the question then becomes, how do you recognize, oh, this is actually becoming a problem? And did you have to hit rock bottom for that to happen? And how did you get out of that?
It's a great question. I mean, the way, especially when I'm speaking to kids, I used to go to schools a lot. So the way I would explain that to a younger audience, so they could really understand, because they would be like, "How did you just turn? How did like your question specifically is alcoholism addiction is really like a train that you hear far, far, far away, and you have a lot of time for most people, and then the train gets a little louder, toots its horn, and what that really looks like is a consequence. And it was your boys being like, "Yo, man, do you remember how whacked you got yesterday? Like, do you remember? Like, yeah, okay, oh yeah." And then the train keeps coming, but you still think there's plenty of time. It, stops, toots its horn, and that's like a girlfriend being like, "Do you remember what happened last night? Like, do you remember what transpired?" And then the train keeps getting closer and closer, and now it's even louder, and that's in the form of, let's say, a DUI. When I got my DUI, there are all these warnings that come along the way, but eventually you think you have so much time in the world, you really do, and the train hits you, and you cross that invisible line, which is completely different and unique to every single person, where it went from a bad habit to a dependency to an actual addiction. And once you cross that line to addiction, there's no going back. A very famous term in recovery you'll hear a lot is, once a cucumber turns into a pickle, it can never go back into a cucumber. And it's true. It's why people use it so much. That's what happened to me. It wasn't like I was an idiot. It wasn't like I was naive. I saw all the warnings. I heard all the complaints. I just thought I had more time.
Yeah, I like this pickle to or the cucumber to pickle analogy. But it does seem like you've managed to turn your life back around and become a cucumber again. Not to step on your analogy, but once you're at that point and you've the train has hit you, so to speak, what can someone do in that moment of realization? Like if someone's listening and they're either in that place or they can see the train at a distance and it's coming towards them, what advice would you give that person?
Well, let me address something with you really fast, and
Sure.
then let's go into the advice for
Sure.
people. Don't confuse the outside with the inside, right? If I drink, if I take a drug, I'm off to the races. Don't allow my 20 years of recovery make you think that I am a cucumber again.
I see.
You know what I mean? That would be fraudulent. And that would make anybody think that they can do that. And we would be doing a huge disservice. What happens is it's a spiritual disease. Alcoholism and addiction is a disease, true disease. To be a disease, you have to have four qualifications in the medical journal. You have to be progressive. Over time, you get worse. You have to be chronic. You're always there. You have to be primary, not secondary. So secondary would look like this. I drove my car into the wall, couldn't believe it, so I had a few drinks. That's secondary. Primary is I had a few drinks and I drove my car into the wall. That was number three. The fourth thing is you have to be fatal. Primary, chronic, progressive, and fatal. Now, you take one of these away, it's still pretty bad disorder, but it's not a disease. Alcoholism addiction is a disease. It's a disease. I have that, but I'm in recovery. So I have recovered from that disease. I'm not cured of that disease,
Gotcha. That's an
but I
important distinction. Thank you for
but I have
clarifying.
recovered from that disease.
Yeah.
And what people can, it's very, it's so great to go over because there is a beauty to the language. There is a beauty. And I've had a lot of friends, people I love so much, never judging, never go back out because they didn't even understand that. They thought, oh, like you said, look at you, everything on the outside is great. They forgot who they were. They forgot what they were. But what people can do is, well, there's many, many things. The first thing is just to get honest. If this conversation is resonating with you, it's resonating with you for a reason. And it could be yourself, it could be a loved one, but it's about being honest. And for some reason, when we're talking about this specifically, it gets really scary to get that honest about what's really happening. And then take a look at one, do you have to, if it's yourself, start changing your ways, start changing your behaviors. If you're having a problem with that, seeking some advice, some mentorship, some guidance, some therapy, some coaching, some help. And if it's a loved one, to get the courage, and you really mean that word, courage, to be able to look them in the eye and say, we have to have a talk.
How much of addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or in my conversation with Dr. Rob Kelly, we talked about other kinds of addictions as well. You can be addicted to the gym or success or things that are quote unquote good addictions. But someone who's facing an addiction, is it at its core an identity crisis in the sense of like, in order to overcome it, do you have to become a person who, instead of saying, I don't, I want to stop drinking, instead of saying, I need or want to stop drinking, you have to start saying, I need to become the kind of person who doesn't need or want to drink?
Oh, I think this is a healthy conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, a form of your identity has to die in order to be reborn. No doubt about it. But this is much more of a soul sickness, of a spiritual disease. And therefore, it's not just rewiring your subconscious mind, which helps in a lot of different areas in your life. Very, very big conversation in personal development. This is actually a surrender. So it is less of the personal development conversations, less of the subconscious mind conversations, less of the identity conversations, and more of the spiritual conversations, more of the surrendering conversations, more of the higher power conversations. It's not that they both don't meet in the middle, but you have to start with what the real problem is. And the problem is not your identity. Your
Can
problem the disease lies in the mind. It's the disease is in the mind. You have to literally surrender and let go. And then you have to recover from the physical, right? It's the mental and the physical. It's not, there's a famous line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which says, it wasn't very helpful for us to be told you're just maladjusted to life. You have to understand the physical component of it as well.
When you say spiritual, I think maybe some people will listen to that and maybe think of religious context, like they're, need to find Jesus or pray or whatever the thing is. That what you mean? Or is it more of a grounded spirituality?
Spirituality is like everyone's body. It's like everyone's nutrition. It's like everyone's likes or dislikes. It's to the individual. It's really to the individual. So if it's the word God, if it's Jesus Christ, if it's Buddha, if it's Allah, if it's Yahweh, if it's higher power, if it's divine consciousness, if it's universe, these things are an ever-growing uh, relationship in which some of these things may come in and out, of your life. But the idea is that that's where the conversation should be leading, rather than let me just focus on my identity.
So in your work as a coach, are you helping primarily people who are addicts and alcoholics?
My career started like that because there was a major need, but then it really branched out to life, because it's 2026 and life is moving really fast. And people are developing, again, like I was telling you before, bad habits and dependencies and even addictions on anything and everything. You could go personal development wise and say that those are patterns. It does it. The languaging you have to meet the person. You have to meet the individual where they're at. If somebody has a bad habit and they want to stop a pattern, don't use the word addiction. They're going to run out the door. They're going to run out the door. Yeah. So you have to meet the person where they're at. But where I focus on is somebody's feeling like they're a prisoner in their own heart, in their own mind. The heart and the mind are not connected, and they're just looking for somebody to give them the key. And that's where I step in. So especially with my one-on-one clients, majority of the times it looks like the Matrix, where they really are Mr. Anderson and looking for Morpheus. And I show up as Morpheus, but I'm also there to tell them that you're not Mr. Anderson. You're not Thomas Anderson. You're Neo. And we're going to go on this journey, and I'm going to show you exactly who you are.
Yeah, I really like the hero's journey sort of theme that runs through your work because I work primarily in TV and film, and the hero's journey is a storytelling concept as well that's, as old as time. And so being the hero of your own story is a really interesting message. I wonder, how do you get someone who's maybe not feeling like such a hero? How do you get them from that sort of downtrodden place to becoming the hero of their own life?
It takes a certain vulnerability and it takes a certain connection. You have to really connect with them and actually be interested in their life, right? So especially with my one-on-one clients, I do it with my groups as well, but with groups, it's a different format. But you have to be extremely interested in their life it is pen to paper, it is whiteboard, and we map out everything from birthday to mom and dad, if they're alive, to siblings, to how you grew up, to what it was like in the household, religion, were you the popular kid, were you unpopular kid, kindergarten, first grade through fifth grade, friendships, you name it, quirks, heavy kid, skinny kid, athlete, bumbling, stumbling, nerd, doesn't matter. Middle school, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, bunch of estrogen, bunch of testosterone, first kiss, couldn't get the kiss, first drink, still never had a drink, whatever it is. High school, what was that like? All the peer pressures and the pressures of the world. College, but what happens is they're going to start to see a theme run throughout their life. They're going to see patterns run throughout their life, and they're going to see arcs run out throughout their life. And then I show them in every single story to mankind how their journey is exactly like that. They
That's
just haven't taken the time to realize that they're important as well. The famous quote, "A life unexamined is not worth living." So they realize, and then there's different parts. There's the hero's journey, then there's the mentor's journey, and then eventually there's the surrender journey.
Can you go through what those are? So the hero's journey, the mentor's journey, and the surrender journey.
All right, so there's many different ways of breaking down the hero's journey, created by Joseph Campbell, not actually studied and found by Joseph Campbell, but always there through the beginning of time. The hero's journey, he was able to discover all the themes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's many ways of breaking it down. I'll break it down into really simple. Let's say there's the separation, the initiation, and the return. And I'll try to give you some highlights in that. And the separation, sure. Somebody separating from the old life, separating from who they think they are, separating from a town, separating from an idea. Luke Skywalker about to leave Tatooine, Mr. Anderson about to leave the real world and go into the Matrix. Kal-El about to leave Krypton and go into Earth. Bruce Wayne, Peter Parker, Wonder Woman, Wizard of Oz, doesn't matter. But then within this, so you see the separation, and then there's a call to adventure. Many times that person first resists the call.
Right.
Okay? They resist the call. Like, I can't do this. But eventually they answer the call and the journey begins. And along that journey, they find allies, they pick up a wise mentor. You see this time and time again, be it Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda or Morpheus or Clark Kent's dad, or I forget, Alfred for Bruce Wayne. It doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Uncle Ben for Peter Parker. You could go, it doesn't have to be heroes. It could go to we could go Disney, we can go the Bible. Okay, we could go Isaac, Abraham, Moses, Jacob, Christ himself. You're going to see the hero's arc of a story. King Arthur, Harry Potter. You're going to constantly see the same theme pop up. When they meet the old wise mentor, they start being taught new skills, new ideas, new beliefs, new ways of seeing the world, new ways of behaving in the world, new powers that they didn't even realize that they had within them. Okay. And they have to go through some of these obstacles in life to refine their powers, but eventually they have to come against the dragon. They have to slay the dragon. Every movie will have its own dragon. Everyone will have its own villain. Darth Vader, Zod, the agent, and the agent in No More Friends. But I'm trying to put movies so people go, oh yeah, I see this now almost in everything,
Hmm.
and even in loving movies, from Good Will Hunting to Rudy to The Karate Kid, you're going to see the same theme. But when you have to slay the dragon, what the hero finally realizes was it's not the person, it's not the individual, it was the fear that they had within them to step up and actually do it. It was never the individual. And you slay the dragon and you return home the hero of the story, because you accomplished this amazing goal. Because you're not the hero because you slayed the dragon. You're the hero because you went through this amazing transformation of adventure. You took a leap of faith. But then eventually it's time for you to pass on that wisdom, to pass on that knowledge, to pass on those powers, and you go on the mentor's journey.
Before you jump into the mentor's journey, I just want to point something out that I thought was really interesting. The stories you described, and you very eloquently used movies to describe them, really resonates with me because what you're sort of describing from a writing standpoint is the difference between plot and story. So the
Yes,
plot is we have to slay the dragon, but the story is that transformational experience that the character goes through.
you're 100% right. Transformation, adventure. Then there's the mentor's journey, which comes with its own separation, initiation, and return, but you're in a different role and you're having to learn how to pass on the wisdom and how to know when not to be involved and when to be involved, and also how to translate and articulate these gifts that you've been taught in a way that somebody else can actually receive them. A good example of what it would not look like are my greatest hero, athletic wise, who I've had the blessing to get to know, is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is the first one to say in any interview, "I'm not a coach. I'm not a coach." He led differently, and he leads his life differently, right? And that does not mean he's not. He's probably one of the greatest leaders of all time. He mentored Kobe because they had the same blood, they had the same identity, right? And that's where you could, but he's not a coach, right? And you start realizing who you are on this mentor's journey. Are you the coach? Are you Jordan to Kobe? Are you Obi-Wan to Luke? Are you super involved and you're actually there the entire time? But you have to go on that journey to find out what your skills are to pass on this knowledge, because if you don't share it, you lose it. Period. If you don't share the wisdom, you lose the wisdom. That's just the law of life. You have to pass it on if you want to keep it, right? You
Are you
have to.
keeping it for yourself, do you mean, or are you keeping it through legacy of this next generation?
You could say you're keeping it for your own self, for your own connection to God, for your own legacy. That goes into that person's identity, right? And that's the mentor's journey. That's the discovery path.
So
That's how
that's
it,
different. That's different for different people and how they experience that. So
100%.
okay. So we have the hero's journey, we have the mentorship journey, and then the third one was surrender.
And then there's the surrender journey. And that's again, your separation, initiation, return, but that's with your higher power. That's with God. That's with a greater, deeper calling in the number one relationship. Now, obviously, you can have some of these all at the same time, but it's really healthy to see these stages of life. You could explore all three at the same time. You could play with all three at the same time. You're on it right now as we speak. But, Mike, I have bad news for you, or maybe good news. And I
Mhm.
have bad news for everyone that listens to your show, or good news, which is you're going to die, period. You're not going to win. So you have to have a relationship with something much deeper. Your mom may die. Your mom may be dead for all I know right now. Everyone you know is going to die. Everybody. You don't get to pick when. You don't get to choose how. You may think everything's certain. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be able to call my dad. Many people wake up and that's not the case.
It sounds harsh, but it's such an important point. It reminds me
It's a
of,
gift. It's not harsh. It's a gift. It makes you appreciate life. It sounds harsh if you think negatively,
yeah,
or it makes you wake up to what's important.
that's what I'm sort of was like leaning towards, this idea that it sounds harsh, but it is a gift, because it reminds me of this Stoic principle of memento mori, right? This idea of remember that you will die. And remembering that you will die sounds morbid and dark and sad, but it's also freeing in a way where you could be like, okay, does this thing I'm worried about right now really matter? Does this thing that is stressing me out going to change the world or change my life? It's like, remember that you will die. So if you want to go talk to the girl, go talk to the girl. If you want to apply for the job, apply for the job. It's sort of a freeing, a way to free up the mental obstructions that sometimes face us. At least that's what it's been for me.
No, I love that. I love that. It also shows where your imagination and where your heart is right now, right? So right, those two things, what I saw was courage, right? But also, hey, you're gonna die. Certain people are gonna hear, I need to make up with my dad.
Hmm.
I need to call that person I love.
Right.
I need, I mean, it depends where you're at in your life and what stage of the hero's journey you're on. So they all overlap and they all intertwine. They all intertwine.
Well, what would you say to someone who's like feeling resistance to pursuing that journey? If there's, a relationship they want to build or a job they want to apply for, there's just something in their life isn't right, but they're afraid to take that journey. They're in that resistance phase. They're in that place where, Shrek doesn't want to leave his swamp yet. How do you get them to take that journey?
That's where you have to get to know the personality. In my opinion, you really have to talk to the person and you have to get to know the person because there are going to be certain people that you can speak to and show them that in order to get onto that journey, they're about to create the greatest life for themselves, right? It's just a belief. Certain people need to be like, you need to talk to them because they need certain people just are wired different. They need to be like, okay, good for you. Stay in that life. Good for you. As a matter of fact, when I look at you, I actually think you don't deserve it. You don't. You don't deserve the girl. You don't deserve the money. You don't. You're right. You're 100% right. You just saved me a lot of time. Do I actually feel that way? No. Of course not. Nobody feels that way about another soul. It's a way to push them out of their shell, but that depends on the person's personality,
Yeah, it's like a tough love approach.
depending on the person.
So you really have to get a sense of who they are and how they respond to feedback to sort of, I guess, decide which approach you're going to take.
100%.
What about the role of creativity? Is there a big part of this podcast for me is about exploring creativity. And we hear a lot about recovery with music, recovery with art. There's also a way to sort of blow off steam and stress using more often like physical forms like martial arts or kickboxing or something. People really like to do those, like hitting things to sort of release stress. But I wonder if there's a place for creativity in your work, maybe not only in how you approach your clients, but also in recovery or in a therapeutic sense, like coloring or music or painting or performance. Like can those
Yes,
can,
100%.
How so?
Well, all of it, and then some. So again, I believe that there is a creator, and we're a part of that creator. And therefore, our greatest gift is to be creative, right? To expand, to grow, to create. You know, my ex-wife and I wish we could have made it, didn't happen. Happens very often nowadays. But we created two gorgeous lives together. There's create and music is healing, art is healing, reading is healing, going to the beach is creative and healing. Sound waves are healing. We're living in a fascinating time. Sound waves, lights, meditation, all of this is creativity. And it's tapping into the senses that we're just not all attuned to because we just got used to the five basic ones. But I mean, Mike, there's so much out there. Do you realize, first off, when I was growing up, I'm a kid from the 80s, right? How old are you?
I'm 35.
All right, I'm 50. This is some Buck Rogers Star Wars nonsense back in the day. You know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
is like a lightsaber, right? But
Yeah.
right now I don't even know how we're doing this, but right now there are radio waves that are creating this. And there are solar panels and radars that are laying planes. Pilots are right now flying planes, not looking at all where they're going, by the way, and letting all the equipment, right? There are whales speaking underneath the ocean as we speak. There are dog whistles that are happening this second that you can't hear. Just because you can't see, taste, touch of it, none of the five basic senses does not mean that it doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, that is an overwhelming thought that I have had before. This idea that everything is happening all at once, and just because you're not cognizant to it doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening. And what are you not aware of, and how is that shaping your thought process in your life? And yeah, it's a lot. And to touch your point on the airplane thing too, it's like, yeah, so many people, including myself, will like sit on the airplane and just like be on their phone and like forget the insane miracle that's happening at this very moment that we're flying through the sky that, 100 and whatever years ago we wouldn't have dreamed of doing this.
Yeah.
So like appreciating life, I think, and appreciating the small things and taking a moment to smell the roses and look around at how incredible your life can be is a good thing. But it's also, I think, very easy to get caught up in, oh, this person has a better car than me, and or a better job than me, and I wish I was more like this, and I wish I was taller and more jacked and more this or more that, and you can feel like you're not enough. Do any of your clients, do you deal with clients who experience this? And for anyone listening, how can they pull themselves out of that experience? Because it can be a very draining and difficult trap to get out of.
I dealt with that myself, and majority of my clients feel like that in some capacity or area of their life, not always the full darkness of the soul.
Sure.
But there's a it's a blend, right? It's a two-sided coin. One side of the coin is God will do for you what you cannot do for yourself. Fact. And then the flip side of that coin is God will not do for you what you can do for yourself. And that little gap, that's where life connects, right? And you do have to realize your own power. And you do have to realize that this whole thing is a gift and can be taken away at any time.
Mhm.
And you also have to realize that you're not in charge. So you have to take the next action with letting go of the outcome. And that's extremely challenging for people. But when you start doing that repetitively, you do start coming out of that shadow. That's shadow work that you just were talking about, right? Now
Mhm.
everything is labeled nowadays, but like that, what that was is shadow work. You start coming out of those shadows, those doubts, those fears, those insecurities, what certain people would call imposter syndrome, whatever it is. But this whole thing is to realize that life is a beautiful gift. Life is a beautiful gift. And it's just extremely easy to forget. I
Totally.
forget So you have no idea how many times I have to tell myself throughout the day to wake up because I go on autopilot. I go on robot mode. I'm hypnotized by the outside world. I keep believing what I'm seeing. And I actually believe that I'm going to see my girl tonight and I'll kiss her. And I actually believe that I'm going to train with my son in a few hours. And I actually believe that my parents are going to land in Tokyo in a few hours. But you know what the truth is? I have no idea. I may have said goodbye to my parents for the last time. I may die. And I have to remind myself constantly to wake up.
I think a lot of people can find themselves stuck in that autopilot mode. I certainly do. Oh, we're just going to wake up tomorrow and this is going to be fine. It's not always fine. And so really enjoying the moment, enjoying life, it's so easy to say. It's so easy to say because I find myself even stressing and worrying and to be able to like have that perspective and at least wake yourself up, as you say, out of that automaticity is a really important scale. And one way that I've been trying to build it is through meditation. Is there any other ways that you would suggest people try to build that skill to wake up out of that state frame of
Absolutely.
mind?
Yeah. I mean, there's tons. There's meditation, there's journaling, there's exercise, there's resistance training, there's yoga, there's swimming, there's just going in Mother Nature, grounding, being by the beach, being by the ocean. If you're not in those type of locations, just finding a park. For me, I actually love the city. Sometimes it's just walking in the city and marveling. But it's detaching from the noise. And really, that's what this is. And it's getting louder and louder. Our phones, our devices, social media, YouTube, anything at any time that you need. So it's getting louder and louder. And I don't think that these things are necessarily bad, but at the same time, they're extremely addictive. I don't think alcohol is bad, right? A rabbi or a priest can have a glass of wine, sip during a sermon. What I mean? I don't think it's bad. Heroin was created for when you need an operation, so you don't feel the pain. How can I say things are bad or good, right? But this thing an unbelievable gift to humanity, but it's extremely addictive and can rob you of your soul. So it's a matter of self-awareness, a little bit of discipline, um, some maturity for sure. And all of us fall short. All of us.
Yeah, it's definitely technology has definitely been a gift, but there is a sense of like not being built to handle looking at a screen 23 hours a day. It feels
Yeah.
like what you're describing with some of those suggested like techniques to sort of pull yourself out of that automaticity is like a lot of it has to do with physical stuff, getting out into the world, going for a walk, doing some yoga, going to the gym, meditating. It's like getting into nature. It's like sort of going back to a physical sense of being in your own body.
Yeah, I think so. In your own body, out of your own body, getting out of your head is, I think, what we're really trying to say.
Yes.
Getting
Yeah.
out of your head. And one of the healthiest ways to do that, if none of this stuff resonates with somebody,
Yeah.
is just go do something for somebody else. Like,
Mm.
you're not that important.
I think that's why pets are so life-saving to a lot of people because it's like you're preparing a meal for your pet or you're taking your pet for a walk. It's like you're doing something for this other being that it can't do for itself. And it gives you a sense of like love and purpose. And it's that same idea of like going out and exercising or going out and helping someone else. It's like you're doing something either for yourself or for this other being that is helpful. And in turn, that gives you a sense of well-being.
100%. a
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Look, what this whole conversation has really been about, right? It's interesting. It starts with alcoholism, addiction, recovery.
Hmm.
But really the whole thing is coming back to that, like that life is a gift
Yeah.
and that you're locked inside of your heart and you're a prisoner of your mind. And that can be a really, really scary place to be. So the idea is to unlock your heart and get out of the prison, free your mind. And that's where all the beauty in life lies.
Yeah. It's being able to figure out the particular way for you to make that happen. That seems to be the challenge.
Depends, sometimes you find the right mentor, you find the right
Yeah,
allies, you find the right voice that you've been looking for. So for some people, it could be Dr. Joe Dispenza, but for other people, it's Tony Robbins, but for other people, it's Michael Jordan, but for
right.
other people, but and certain people will come in your life and certain people will leave your life. And those are all, that's all divine. Sometimes it's your own dad and mom, and
Hmm.
you were just too caught up in being a spoiled brat to realize that there was a lot of wisdom coming out of them. It just comes in all shapes, sizes, flavors. The idea is just to be open.
Fair
Sometimes
enough.
you're scared. Sometimes you're a Jew and you're scared to say, why is it that that guy Jesus, everything that I'm reading resonates with me? And does that mean if I actually start thinking that his teachings are real, I'm not Jewish? I mean, because you're married to an identity.
Right.
Like, explore, be open, look.
Adam, we're coming to the end of the podcast here, and I want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing your insights. I like to end the podcast by asking one last question, and that is, if there was a time that you stepped outside your comfort zone and how that shaped your life.
God, man, that's been my life's purpose. Let's go with the main one. Without the main one, I wouldn't be here today. When I surrendered and I stepped out and said, okay, I'll go to rehab, that shifted everything. And that took me from the physical world to the spiritual world and let me in. Right? But I've done that, what we're talking about right now, that exercise, getting out of my comfort zone, that is a daily exercise for me. That's a daily thing now. And I've gotten addicted to it.
In what way are you addicted to? Like you just try to force yourself to do it all the time.
Yeah, well, I just every time something that I've wanted or admired or loved or want to accomplish has always been on the other side of that fear that wants to stop me every single time.
Hmm.
So
Well,
if it's driving race cars, jumping out of a plane just to show myself I could do these, swimming with sharks, to starting my own business, to helping people that I never thought I would meet because they were on posters of my wall, just being able to say everything I wanted is on the other side of that.
I think that's a great message. Where can people find you, Adam, if they want to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, Adam Jablin everywhere, from Instagram to TikTok to Facebook to YouTube, and always happy to talk to another soul.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Likewise, Mike. Thanks for everything, man.